Welcome back. We're having an update on what's happening with the war in Ukraine, with the Russian invasion. It's been, can you believe it? We're coming up to almost 1 year. And joining us to help us unpack what's been going on the last several months is Dr. Alistair Edgar. Thank you again for joining me today, Dr. Edgar. We know that, well, actually, let's do an update first. So it's been, again, 10 months. Where do things sit now? You mentioned in the first segment that, it looked like Russia was, well, at least they were definitely attempting to, and they seemed like they were almost going to take Kyiv. They did not. There was a lot of encroachment in eastern Ukraine. Where have the Russians encroached now, and are they still holding that land, or has Ukraine taken it back?
Actually, Ukraine has done, from a Ukrainian perspective, incredibly well in resisting Russia. Obviously, Russia failed to take Kyiv. The Ukrainians pushed them back all around Kyiv, right up to the Russian border. And then in the south, Donetsk, Luhansk, the Crimea area, and Kherson, all in south and southeast Ukraine. The Ukrainians have really been pushing Russia all the way back. They've liberated Kherson, which is the first major city that the Russians had occupied. They've liberated that, and now they're starting to press Russia. Geopolitically, they're pushing them across the river. They're looking for weak spots. There are small Russian incursions in some, literally now fighting for little villages.
Wow.
But the Ukrainians are really chasing the Russians south and out.
My goodness. And when the Ukrainians are taking back their territory that was occupied, that was taken over, and they're reclaiming it, what are they finding? Are villages and towns, are they entirely razed? Are there a lot of victims of this war?
Absolutely. During the attack, the Russians' approach was just carpet bombing or carpet artillery, wiping out everything in front of them. And they really rely on heavy artillery and other missile attacks. So enormous infrastructure damage, just total destruction. And as the Russians have been pushed out and the Ukrainians have come in, they're also starting to find lots of examples of torture, of arbitrary execution of civilians, and of forced deportation of Ukrainians, including the Ukrainian children who've been essentially stolen and deported back to Russia.
Oh, that's devastating. Of course, there's always casualties, there's always devastation in war, and you always think of the children and what the lasting impacts will be on them. To have children stolen is just it's an abomination. Anyhow, with the conflict, so with seeing Ukraine's strong resistance to taking back, and again, it was unprecedented, but I think a lot of the foreign member states, we came in, especially with NATO, and really helped bolster a lot of their supplies, because to go up against the Russian military is quite an accomplishment. How has foreign funding factored into this conflict?
Considerably. I would say there's two things. You may know, or you may remember that the Ukrainians immediately said, women and children need to evacuate, and you'll be talking about refugees, but that men, especially fighting-age men, should stay, should not leave Ukraine, should stay. So in actual personnel terms, oddly enough, the Ukrainians have more men in uniform in Ukraine than the Russian forces do. But Russia has the heavy artillery, the bombardments, all of those things. And that's where foreign support has come in. Direct funding to buy weapons and buy supplies, but also then actual equipment on the ground. So people who've been following that probably know the HIMARS, the US surface-to-surface missile systems, Stinger shoulder-fired missiles, howitzers, the tanks, armored personnel carriers. A lot of that equipment has been given to Ukraine, and they are fighting back as much as they can. What they don't have is what I'd call medium to longer range equipment, missile systems that can reach into Russian territory. And NATO has been very careful in that sense about giving them short and medium range defense capabilities, but not the longer range defense capabilities.
And why? We have about 30 seconds before commercial, but why has NATO been very careful?
The concern has been that Ukraine would use these to strike into Russian territory, which might escalate Russian threats. Putin waved nuclear weapons around. I think that's been exaggerated. So now there's a move to give them more longer range weapons.
Okay. Well, we're going to pack more of this conflict when we return in just a few moments. Please stick around.